Welcome to Transforming with Drew, where we talk about all things transgender from F to M to M to Fs and how to change your life for the better.
Hi, this is Drew, and welcome to Transforming with Drew, where we talk about everything on the transgender, intersex, non-binary, third gender podcast. And today we have Dr. Salvato with us. My pronouns are he, him. Would you like to share your pronouns with everybody?
Yeah, they, them.
They, them. All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to even finding Transforming with Drew, and what your experience is as somebody who identifies as they, them.
Sure, I'll do my best. And first, please call me Gian Michael. It's easier to pronounce than it is to spell. But a lot of people go the Dr. Salvato route just because they look at that name and they're like, "Oh, I'm not even going to try that." So it's usually how it goes. Well, let's see. I found your show through one of the Facebook groups that we're both a part of, and loved some of the posts that I saw you making and some of the other folks in the group making related to the show and people who want to be on the show. And I'm a content creator and podcaster myself. So anytime I can be of support to our community and to the podcast and creator community, it's just a pleasure to do so. Let's see. What I suck at talking about me because I do podcasting. I'm like want to automatically go into asking questions mode. So tell me what you want to know.
Well, first of all, tell everybody a little bit about where you're from and your beginning of your journey and what led you to be the person that you are today. Because we do know you have the doctor title.
Yes, yeah. So I was not born a coal miner's daughter, but I came from a family, an Italian family that was very stereotypically Italian, huge in the Northeast, and grew up between Philadelphia and South New Jersey, as most of us have a tendency to do in this country. And so we're 40, then we go to Boca. But I realized when I was probably 5-6 years old that that the construct of gender being on the spectrum also, I bristle at these words, but what my parents were told at about 5 or 6 was that I was quote unquote high functioning non-Asperger's. Thank goodness we don't use terms like that anymore. But understanding that I was on the spectrum probably gives a little insight into the fact that my mind was looking at the whole gender construct, even though I didn't know that's what it was called, as really being curious. And so at like 6, I think it was, I wanted to see everybody's genitals, because in my head, and I remember this really distinctly, both because of it happening and because of being forced to see a psychiatrist immediately thereafter because they thought that was such weird behavior. I didn't want to touch anybody's genitals. I didn't want to experiment. I just wanted to see them because in my head I thought, well, do girls who are a little more rough and tumble have different vaginas than girls who are all prissy and want to play with Barbie dolls? And do boys who want to play with Barbie dolls and are more sensitive, like I was called, have different genitals than the sports kind of rough and tumble boys? And I should have realized at that point that there was a research scientist waiting to evolve in me at that time, because it was purely like curiosity. Like I couldn't understand and wanted to see, because I didn't feel like I fit in with any of those groups. Not that it was an either or for me. It just didn't make sense how our identity was attached to our genitals, when I felt like my identity, even at 6, was so much bigger than that. And so that got me, to see a psychiatrist. Luckily for me, I ended up with a psychiatrist who was, especially for that time, because I'm 58, was very progressive. Told my parents there's absolutely nothing wrong with your child. Gave a lot of direction that, had my parents taken the direction, would have probably been very helpful. But lucky for me, my parents discussed that with my grandmothers. So my grandmothers took the therapist's instructions and made sure that I was raised, even, being in a big Italian family on one side and Hungarian gypsies on the other side. Both grandmothers were a major part of my life. And so they had the formative input that always let me know that I was okay exactly as I was, and that I probably wasn't going to fit in. I probably was something other. And so at 16, I went away to college. And while I was in college, my intended degree was going to be law and anthropology. And that's when I started to find out that in other cultures, most other cultures, in fact, outside of the colonialist set of European and later American cultures, there were 3 to 5 genders that were recognized, and throughout indigenous cultures, including the Americas, there were multiple genders, and even in the Abrahamic traditions in the ancient world, there were multiple genders being expressed. So that was like the light bulb going off in my head. And then I realized, well, all I have to do is kind of figure out which one of those relates to today. And then the puberty on overdrive at 16 and a half, 17 kicked in, and I no longer really cared. I found the LGBTQ community. I found that I fit in. Nobody was asking me to express and make a permanent decision on my identity. So I was in seminary, but on the weekends doing drag, and exploring that whole world. It seemed to me like that was like that wasn't something that didn't make sense. I could look at it now and see that there was irony there, between wanting to wear a simple black dress and stand at an altar, and then wearing fabulous dresses. But as I continued to mature and continued to get older, we found ourselves, when I was 20, at the beginning of the AIDS pandemic. I was sexually assaulted, raped, and beaten by 4 people, that had a beef with the cops. I was on my way to a bar in a cop or security guard uniform. I was mistaken for a cop, and these were 4 Haitian immigrants who, in South Florida, in Hollywood, who were being abused, like George Floyd style abuse, in the 80s, because they were not welcomed by the xenophobic community in South Florida. And so they probably had every reason to be furious and hate the cops. And unfortunately, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. That resulted in my being infected with HIV, almost losing my life, 6 months later with pneumonia. And it was at that time, during that recovery process, that I really started to, just because of health reasons and a number of other things, started to explore the possibility of going into natural medicine, particularly working within the transgender community, because at that time, in 1983, in 1983, there were drag queens, some of whom were trans, some of whom were just entertainers. There was the gay community as a whole. There was the offshoot leather community. I don't even know if in '83 we had the bear community yet. But then there's the lesbian community. And in Central Florida, where I came back to, where my parents were living, it was really fragmented. I lived at the Parliament House, for a number of years, and was a performer there. And I saw even within the drag and trans community that there was just so much division. There was so much not fitting in. And if you dared to express that you were something other than the convenient little things that fit in little holes, little cubby holes, you had people like the late Miss P attacking you every week on stage, even as a fellow performer. So I left. I said, "Fuck that." I went to. I don't know if you use that kind of language on your
Yeah,
show. Sorry.
you're fine. You're fine. I have a little button that says this contains explicit language.
Okay, get ready to use it. No, so then I went to New York and finally really found my home, found my community and my people. Connected with the ballroom scene, and some amazing people in our community like Jack Dorshow, who said, "Stop trying to figure it out. Just be you. You're home. You're safe. This is safe space, and it doesn't have to have a label." And from that point on, that kind of became the backdrop and the story of my life. There were times when it felt more safe to express who I was. Other times that it didn't. There were times that I really struggled with feeling like I had to make a choice, like I was buying into the societal construct that even as a trans person, it meant that I either had to identify as male or female. And I would say probably in the last 5 years, finally reached a point where I could be really comfortable saying, no, I don't have to make those choices and I don't have to fit in. And if I don't feel like shaving, I don't have to shave, and I could still, be wearing clothes that are stereotypically more feminine or softer. And if I want to, as happens more often than not, if I happen to be in what I call boy drag, maybe a little bit more exotic looking eyes, but a flannel shirt and Timberlake's, like who cares? That's who I am, and you get the whole package or you don't get any at all. And so I worked in holistic medicine and research for a number of years, and about 5-6 years ago, just decided to kind of switch gears away from a clinical practice where the burnout was becoming significant, and actually it was right after the Pulse massacre that we were talking about before the show that I decided my work was strictly going to be working in counseling, peer counseling, pastoral counseling, therapy with folks who were struggling with gender identity, and that's it.
I get and that's it. But no, there's definitely multifacets. It's funny, you were talking about when you were a child and you were like looking and trying to be like, I just want to see if everybody's different or the same. It reminded me of a book that my grandfather bought me when I was younger, and it was called Why Is the Penis Shaped Like That? By Jesse Buring. And he got in trouble, I think around the same age you did. And he's like, is it weird that my penis is curved to a girl? Because he didn't know any better. He was just curious, right? And it just reminds me of like how we have this innate curiosity for children because we just kind of shut them down of what gender's supposed to be or what they should wear, what they should not wear from day one. Like you have the baby gender reveals, you have the pinks and the blues, and they're like, oh, look, it's the gender, when really it's the sex of the baby. And then we should be able to, hopefully in the future, I think I was talking about my wife at this like a while ago. I hope I'm not misquoting her or anything, but I think it was like, okay, so that's what the baby was born. Maybe they could do a gender reveal when they're older. What do they feel like? Something like kind of on that lines. And I thought that was really beautiful to say and kind of a neat, like an eye-opening thing. And yes, we were talking about the pulsing because oddly enough, we both know people from the situation. I used to go to that club a lot. We're both D&D people. We like to make sure people go get safe and stuff. I remember when Pulse opened, I remember seeing as my friends perform there when they tore down Revolution and made Bar, which was the worst thing I did. But at least it's fixed now. I mean, and it's beautiful what they're doing and making it a memorial and all the things that we've gone through. And I think that what you're doing now, helping people figuring out their identity